And so it's really a local name. In other places they might well call it a creek or this, that, or the other. This is called 6 Mile Cypress, not because the slough is 6 miles long. When the farmers from LaBelle and all the places south of Mockley, south and west of here, south and east of here, used to come in to sell their things, they always were going to Fort Myers or to Punta Rassa, somewhere like that. They knew when they got here it was 6 more miles to Fort Myers. So that's how it got the name 6 Mile Cypress Slough. Linda and I learned that from one of the people who worked here, because we asked them, and because I'd heard so many different stories. This slough does occasionally go dry. This pond doesn't, but the slough overall will get very dry, except for the main channel of water. But you already know enough about wetlands by now to know if it didn't go dry, you'd never get any new seeds sprouting. These seeds don't sprout underwater. Pig frog. That was a pig frog. There are no bullfrogs down here. Bullfrogs stop just barely north of here. And exactly why, no one's really ever definitively answered. Probably has to do with water temperature and water pH. The mineolite calcium substrate is a little closer to the surface here, and sometimes a pH of 1/10 of a point can cause one thing to thrive versus not thrive. Often very sensitive to that. But anyway, that's a pig frog. There's a good chance you'll see some today. It's not that unusual. We're going to be going through the slough on the boardwalk. We're going to be having some 5-minute presentations. Who's doing their 5 minutes? One. Peter, you're going to do water quality and wetlands.
I'm doing preservation.
Well, would y'all like to do them now? This is a good spot.
I don't know.
Because there are times on the boardwalk we can't gather people up because we'd block the boardwalk and other people are using it. So why don't we start?
Okay. Well, I'm glad you chose this place, because I really was hoping for a beautiful spot to draw attention to the time that we have when we're in the wetlands, but also to say that I'm hoping that when Brian's grandchildren are here, like we are, it's this nice and nicer. And that's why my topic is preservation of wetlands, but that's not the only reason. And of course, this is obvious to you, but the other reasons that we want to preserve wetlands is to maintain our natural systems and also to provide habitat. I think that's all of our jobs to do that, okay? But we really need large parcels, really big, expensive parcels to do the job right. And when we're talking about that kind of money, we really need for government to be involved. And back in 1963, our state leaders took this very seriously. They kind of got the point too. And they started a fund. And they have raised $1.6 million to begin public acquisition of lands for conservation. You know where they got that money? They put a tax on outdoor clothing. The retailers weren't real crazy about that, as you can imagine. So about 3 years later, they repealed that tax on outdoor clothing, and they started bonding, issuing bonds, so that they could buy parcels of land. Then about, 1989 and 1990, they said it would be better if we had a more stable plan. Because if you have stable and dedicated income, what happens is you can buy land, better pieces of land, because it takes a while. You don't just buy these big parcels in a quick transaction. So the legislature and Florida's governor created Preservation 2000. It was a 10-year plan, $300 million set aside from bonds to purchase land. When that started to run out, you know what they did? Legislature and governor said, we don't want this to stop. And they did what you may know of as Forever Florida. $300 million a year from dock stamps for bonds to buy land. So for the last more than 20 years, on a regular basis, $300 million of Florida taxpayer money been buying land to save for future generations, to protect our natural systems, and provide habitat. So in 2009 and 2010, when that second 10 years ran out, you know what happened? Nothing. Nothing. They never renewed. There's no money going anymore to save land. So that's obviously the bad news. That's what I wanted to share with you today. The good news, though, I do have good news for you. It's something you can do about this. Because on November 4th, Amendment 2 is on the ballot, and what Amendment 2 does is restore that funding to just about exactly what it was for the past 20 years. No more, no less. It takes about 1/3 of our dock stamp revenue, puts it up for bonds, and it allows us to once again start that land preservation. The number one thing that you can do is vote for this, even if you weren't going to vote, even if you don't care who's dog catcher in your county or who the governor is, vote for this. You can vote for just one item. And then, beyond that, I think you can get more people to vote for it. I have a couple other ideas what you can do, but I'm probably up on my 3 minutes, so...
You've got another minute.
Okay,
Minute
well,
and a half.
we have a question.
I do have a question. You're incredibly knowledgeable about the politics that go along with this. Just recently, Governor Rubin Askew died, and I wondered how much he was responsible for any of the funding that went through. Did any of this happen during his time as governor? Because he has gone down as probably one of the most significant governors in the United States, not just for Florida. And I'm wondering if he had anything to do with any of this.
Yes, he was during those early stages. That was, of course, before the Preservation 2000, before we got serious in that manner. But it,
63.
yeah, it doesn't mean that we weren't doing it. It was just different. It was the first establishment of a fund, which really says this is a statement of our values as a government. This is something that we're going to do.
It's also very interesting to me the coalitions that were built as this occurred, because it was a time before, if you go back before 2008, partisan politics was a little less bitter. And there were actually coalitions built that included extreme liberal Democrats and extremely conservative Republicans who saw the value of preserving the Everglades. The Everglades was the focal point of it all, but there are obviously other things. But it's almost impossible to build that kind of coalition today. People are so often more concerned with their party affiliation than with doing what they may feel is correct. I guess that's how you get reelected. But anyway, thank you so much.
I'd like you to share just a tad bit more about why we're doing Amendment 1 when we already had that funding, that exact same funding in place at one point. So why is it going to Amendment 1?
Okay, and I do want to be clear because Amendment 1 is marijuana.
I mean,
So, you gotta be careful.
I'm sorry.
I mean, you don't have to be careful, but I just don't want you to, make us forget our problems so we don't have any land. Right?
Vote yes for both, yeah.
So, as you know, there was a couple times that the voters changed the Florida Constitution in an effort to send the message too. But Preservation 2000, as well as Forever Florida, was law, right? Okay? And the thing about laws, they make them every year. They make 300 plus laws every year. And half those laws, you know what they're doing? They're undoing the law they did the year before, or fixing it, okay? So as long as that was based in law, we were completely, I hope this is what you're asking, we were completely dependent on the governor and the legislature and their, in effect, whims to fund this. And they did fine with it. But obviously they're not doing fine with it now. So what Amendment 2 does is the Constitution is much harder to change than laws. It's just almost impossible, frankly. It's a big burden to change the legislature, to change the Constitution. This will change the Constitution, and the legislature then will have to create laws that that go along with what we put in the Constitution. Yeah. Was that?
That's exactly where I was headed. Yeah, thank you.
You know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I have voted no on almost every constitutional amendment since I've lived in Florida. I think I've voted yes on one or two, because I think most things should be done by law. This one, I think if we don't do it by Constitution, we're going to lose. Things we'll never be able to get back. So this is one of the few times where I'm planning to vote yes on one. That's just my own political. But anyway, any other questions? Yes.
No, I have a natural follow-up to Lori's, and we didn't plan this, but I have some more good news on the preservation of land.
What,
I
you want to do
believe.
your 2 minutes, 3 minutes,
So
5 minutes
I
now?
gave Lori 2 of my 3 minutes.
The question and answer time doesn't count against your 5 minutes.
It won't take me that long, but something struck a nerve with me in one of our first classes. And like Pat shared with us, I think it was last week, it was a personal,
Connection.
yeah, I became personally involved in a desire to become more aware. Linda and Jerry were talking about surplus land and how scary it was that there's land on the for sale list that affects the Florida aquifer. We're in this beautiful area right here at the bottom of the Peace River Basin, and it would impact that tremendously. There was land parcels, large parcels of land for sale it would be the northeast section of the Peace River Basin and up around Davenport, Florida, in that area. And Linda was saying the last time she looked, that was still on the for sale list, and that's frightening, and for a couple of reasons. Those large parcels are absolutely critical to the health and the salvation of our aquifer and to the Peace River Basin. And I got all fired up about that as I sat and listened to it, and as they were talking about it, I'm sitting there shaking my head in class saying, yeah, I know about that. Well, I didn't know anything about that. So I decided to look it up. And the good news is this, in combination with the opportunity to vote for this amendment, I called DEP, and I was, as I said, this issue was good for my chronically low blood pressure. And I was ready to do battle. I'd been doing a little homework and so on. And so I spoke to this lovely young woman who said, I identified the parcels, and I said, I'm very concerned about this remaining on the for sale list, not only for the sake of the aquifer, but that land hopefully could be used in the future, they're talking about, for a wildlife corridor. The I-4 made a barrier right across the state, and it interfered with the natural goings and comings of our wildlife, and we were hoping that some of that land could be used to remedy that situation as well. And I'm telling her, this is what we got to do, and she says, ma'am, she said, we took care of that. And I said, you did? And she said, we did. It's off the list. There is no list. So I said, is that in writing? And she said, it is. And I said, please email it to me. And so anyway, I would encourage you from time to time, because we do have this common interest in this beautiful state of ours and beyond, access the DEP website once in a while, because they put their news bulletins up on a regular basis. And it only takes a minute. Pull it up, take a look, see what they're thinking about now and when their meetings are. But indeed, it was dated February the 28th of this year, and it says for immediate release.
Oh, good.
And what they have done is, she said, we've totally done away with the list. We've totally done away with it.
The whole list?
She said that is a done deal, and she said we are not going by that list. That land is no longer for sale. And I got so incensed about it, and I've got this printed out for us. I'll circulate it when we get to our classroom today. I printed it out so we could all see it in writing. And I forgot where else I was going with that. When I see the printed list, perhaps I'll remember it. But to me, that's just such good news that we're not selling surplus conservation land anymore.
You can
For now.
subscribe to the DEP or any of the government email or alert list, and so I do get some of those. So that you don't even have to bother to go look. They'll just come to your email box.
So sign up and
There
get that
are
news.
there are still some lands I just recently got, and I can't remember the names. I'm gonna have to look them up. But there were just recently 2 pieces of government land that were put on Florida land that were put on
a surplus land?
They were put up for sale. They're actually out for bid at this point in time. But they were much smaller parcels, and there are times when it's
I
appropriate.
read that too. Yeah, I read that too, and it didn't appear to be a threat to a wetlands area or anything like that at the time. And the thing that incensed me is, I remember now, in doing the research, there was a newspaper article from a couple years back when they were coming up with this crazy list. And I guess what was so infuriating to me was they admitted that in an attempt to identify lands they could sell, to try to get money, to try to put that money then into conservation lands again, which, you know, I couldn't get my head around that. But at any rate, they said it was very hastily put together. And they realized that this land of critical concern, good morning, this land of critical concern was on the list, and it shouldn't be, but we're not really ready to move on it just yet, so we're just gonna leave it there. It